Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Zara.
I'm Sam.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been accused of directly asking the former CEO of Qantas, Alan Joyce, for free, undisclosed flight upgrades. The allegation's been detailed in a new book by journalist Joe Aston. Now, following the publishing of an excerpt of that book over the weekend, the opposition has said it will consider establishing a Senate inquiry into the matter. The PM, on the other hand, has suggested the claims come from a person who is just trying to sell a book. In today's deep dive, we'll explain everything you need to know about Albanese and Qantas. Sam, I'd say it's fairly rare for a book to make such a splash before it's even been released. So this book was only released yesterday, Joe Aston's new book.
Hang on, no silly questions, the Daily Aus, September 2023.
I did see wall-to-wall coverage of that book too.
Senate inquiries, the whole lot. But you know what, this book's probably a little more controversial.
It is. So just to give you a bit of context, this book released by Joe Aston yesterday is called The Chairman's Lounge. And over the weekend, we saw the Nine Papers release an excerpt of that book. And in that excerpt, it was published in the Good Weekend, there were a whole lot of, allegations, you'd say, that were levelled at the Prime Minister and at the CEO or the former CEO of Qantas, Alan Joyce. And since that excerpt was published, this story has completely taken on a life of its own.
It's really important to understand who Joe Aston is because I think that has a bit to do with why it's been reported so widely as well. Give me a sense of who this author is.
So Joe Aston is not just an author, he is a journalist. He worked for the Australian Financial Review for over a decade. He resigned last year after, as I said, a fairly long stint, during which time he wrote a column called Rear Window. And a lot of that column was dedicated to, uncovering and exposing different areas of Australian political and media life.
One of the worst things for somebody to wake up to was knowing you were going to be in Rear Window that day.
Exactly. And someone that knew that reality all too well was Alan Joyce, because towards the end of his tenure, Joe Aston spent a lot of his journalistic time covering Qantas. And if you think back, it was during the time where it was COVID, there were layoffs, there was all of the stuff around mass cancellations and flight credits. And Joe Aston really, I'd say, led the way in the coverage on those sorts of issues. Tensions between Joe Aston and Qantas continued to grow and grow and grow. And then they boiled over to the point where Qantas actually stripped the AFR from its lounges and in-flight Wi-Fi services back in 2023.
I remember they literally took out the hard copies of the paper.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's fair to say, to summarise why Joe Aston gets the response that he does, is that he's quite a controversial journalist. He has a very distinct style and way of writing. And to zero in on it, Joe Aston is one of the most read journalists in this country. And so when we realised he was publishing a book, I think everyone expected that there would be a lot there.
And then when the excerpt of the book ran in the Nine newspapers over the weekend, this curiosity as to what was going to be in the book was even more accentuated.
Yeah.
Just on that piece alone in the paper, what did we learn?
So in that excerpt, it was revealed that Anthony Albanese, of course the Prime Minister, received more than 20 flight upgrades between 2009 and 2019. Family members accompanied him on some of these trips, and many of them were personal. Now, the book, which I should very much clarify, was citing anonymous Qantas insiders, which is always a bit of a fraught space to play in. But those people claim that Anthony Albanese directly asked Alan Joyce, the head of Qantas at the time, to upgrade his flights while Anthony Albanese was in the transport portfolio. So the suggestion there is that Albanese, as a politician, had a direct line to the head of Australia's biggest airline, which made up obviously a big part of his portfolio at that time, and that he was using that direct line, allegedly, to ask for personal upgrades. It's important to note that Albanese had previously declared his own personal flights and his membership to the Qantas Chairman's Lounge, which is the name of the book, which is a VIP area. You get food, you get special treatment. It's a place where all MPs and senators are offered access. So that's not really in contention here. What's more in contention is how these upgrades came about and whether or not they were disclosed. Aston also claims that Albanese didn't declare efforts to get his son Nathan a membership to the Chairman's Lounge. That was first reported by the AFR a little while ago, so that's not new information, but that was also included in this excerpt. I think if we're to zoom out and try to understand why this is such a hot political topic, what's being claimed here by Aston is that Anthony Albanese was a political asset for Qantas. So I'm just going to directly quote Aston here. He says, "It was a slice of fortune that fueled Qantas's hubris. The new Prime Minister was an asset that the airline had been developing for 15 years, a transport minister who had been upgraded to the top job." Okay,
so what Joe Aston is trying to highlight, I guess, is not necessarily just the fact that Anthony Albanese allegedly got these upgrades from economy to business class or, some free pajamas, but that it signified a close relationship between the head of Australia's biggest airline and the future Prime Minister, which could have gone both ways. Mm-hmm. That favourable decisions could have been made for Qantas by Albanese and upgrades could have been granted by Qantas the other way.
Exactly. And I think that's what goes to the heart of why this has become such a political issue. And I think that it's, not, as you said, a matter of free pajamas, but it's what it could signify if these allegations are true.
Sure.
And that's certainly what the opposition is talking about this week. So the coalition has been really quick to jump on this one. We've had opposition leader Peter Dutton call it a bit strange that Albanese allegedly asked for these upgrades. He said, "It's a strange arrangement when you can pick up the phone to the CEO and ask, as Transport Minister, for an upgrade for your arrangements." Dutton did admit that he had benefited himself from flight upgrades since being elected to Parliament in 2001, which he said have also been declared. The Coalition's transport spokesperson, Senator Bridget McKenzie, told reporters that the Senate should set up an inquiry into the reported flight upgrades. She said there are serious questions which only Mr. Joyce and the Prime Minister can answer. At the time when she was saying that, she claimed she hadn't received a Qantas upgrade, but shortly after, she did issue a statement confirming she had previously received an upgrade and had publicly declared it. But broadly, the coalition is going in with, we need to understand more about what's happened here, and if something has happened that was not meant to or that was not declared, they want further investigation.
I've noticed a particular point that Bridget McKenzie is highlighting is the decision of the Albanese government in 2023 to block Qatar Airways from increasing the number of routes that they flew in and around Australia. She said during the week, both Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Transport Minister Catherine King have to come clean on whether there was any pressure from the Prime Minister or his office to assist Qantas and its partner Emirates in blocking Qatar Airways' application for these flights.
And again, that is just an allegation that is being made by the opposition. And there has been no confirmation from the Prime Minister that anything like that did take place there.
Well, it's been quite the contrary, right? He's come out very directly against these allegations.
Yeah, so to the point of the upgrades, Albanese has said that he publicly declared everything. He said that he only had direct discussions with Alan Joyce over 2 official flights and that those were publicly disclosed at the time. Here's Anthony Albanese speaking yesterday on the matter.
All of my flights have been declared in an appropriate way, just as Peter Dutton declared his flights, or some of his flights. There is a difference between both of us. My flights were commercial with Qantas or Virgin or Emirates. They were all declared in the appropriate way. I didn't have to declare any flights on private jets owned by billionaires like Gina Rinehart because I haven't engaged in it. As simple as that.
And meanwhile, ministers in Albanese's government, and certainly you heard a bit of it there, have been really trying to flip the script a bit here in recent days. We've had Senior Minister Murray Watt calling the story unsourced rumours being put around by a journalist, and has then tried to highlight that Peter Dutton accepted flights from Gina Rinehart's company and said, "I think it's equally applicable to ask questions of Peter Dutton about what influence Gina Rinehart has over his policies in response to the free flights that he experienced." So the government's really trying to redirect traffic into having a conversation more broadly about who and what politicians accept in their positions of power. But I don't know if that storyline is going to stick per se. I think that there is a lot of attention here on Anthony Albanese and what happens next.
It seems like every couple of months there's a news story from across the political spectrum about allegations of conflict of interest and this recurring idea of how do we know if our politicians have integrity. And we know that trust levels in politicians are dropping lower and lower, and it seems to be a really strong theme of the last decade, and it sounds like into the future. That's all we've got time for on today's episode of The Daily Aus. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love you to give us a rating on Spotify or Apple, or send it to a friend. We'll be back again in your ears tomorrow morning. Until then, have a great day.